Oh boy, am I gonna get a lot of hate mail for this one. The video you're about to watch is an in-depth analysis. If you haven't seen the show or this season, I suggest you watch that before coming back to this video. Battle City is widely considered the best season of the entire show by a lot of folks. The show went full force into a new tournament, held by a fan-favorite character. The show finally found its footing, the duels exciting, the rules altered to make the game more exciting, adding new rules such as direct attacks as well as tributes. But unfortunately, at least until the show gets to the finals, the show suffers from a similar problem to the first season, but this time, it's not with the duels, it's with the story, and what it does with its characters. Now, stuff is still done with its characters, and good stuff at that, but unlike last season, not only is it in the background, even most so than last time, some characters don't even have their proper motivations introduced until near the end of the season. There is a good reason why I don't think this is as good as the last season, and for me it's one of the biggest faults of the season. It's going to be hard to do a full analysis of this season for this sole reason. The story doesn't finish. Spoiler alert, but the season ends right before they make it to the destination where they have the finals. Thus, any conclusions these characters would come to in their arcs, I can't comment on, as we don't know it quite yet. But I'll do what I can with the characters as well as the story. Let's start off with the story itself then, shall we? Like last time, the story revolves around Yugi needing to enter a tournament and win said tournament in order to stop an evil threat. However, unlike last time, Yugi's personal family isn't really in jeopardy. Instead, we have a story where the spirit of the puzzle has to save the world. Thanks to this story, we also learned that the spirit of the puzzle was an ancient pharaoh who saved the world from the Shadow Games. History repeating itself, the pharaoh has to save the world again, just like he did in the past. Honestly, while it's kind of a cool idea for a story, I feel like it's a bit less interesting than last season. Sure, Yugi needs to save the world because of his destiny, but last time he was doing what he was doing to save a loved one, allowing the story to feel more personal, thus we connect with him more. I mean, the story is for the most part ignored in the season itself, it really just being a premise to get the ball rolling so they can get into the tournament. Which is fine, this is a kid's show after all, but it's not even like this story just kind of goes into the background, it kind of just disappears, where instead we get a plot of the villain going after Yugi. In the English version, to steal the Pharaoh's power, and in the Japanese version, so he can get revenge on the Pharaoh. Which, yeah, it's a conflict, but it's not really much of a plot. The whole season pretty much consists of Yugi walks around, one of Merrick's rare hunters attacks him and forces him to duel, Yugi wins, and then Joey walks around, finds someone from Season 1, duels him, wins, and then the cycle repeats. I'm not saying that's a bad way to have the season go, but after a while it does get a bit tiring. Thankfully, with the creation of the duel disc, the duels themselves are much more exciting, but I'll get to those a little later. Honestly, the most interesting character in the entire season is Merrick. I know I've saved the best character for last time, but there aren't many new characters or arcs to really talk about this time. Merrick, of course, is the main villain of the season. What an interesting villain. A man who was tortured by his father and felt that suffering through that torture throughout his life entitled him to the power of a man he and his family swore to protect. Now, this is one of the changes 4Kids brought to the show. Now, honestly, I know a lot of people don't share this opinion. I like this backstory for Merrick a little bit more. In the Japanese version, Merrick's backstory was just your basic revenge plot, where he blamed the pharaoh for the death of his father due to Shadi having a connection with him, which I guess does make sense, but I like the idea more that the traumatic experience he went through in becoming a tomb keeper caused him to resent a man who his family had been protecting for years. Now, of course, this could have been used in a way to make him a truly sympathetic character. The problem with giving him this backstory is that this comes far too late in the story for it to really have an impact. Let me explain what I mean by this. This could have worked really well as a tragic villain if they would have shown any hint of it earlier on in the season. We don't find out any of this until near the end, right before the split personality that they established one episode earlier takes over. We have no time to think over his origin. With the way it plays out in the show, it feels like they put in the backstory just so they could have the last minute twist. Merrick's character throughout the entire season before this gives no hint to any kind of split personality, or even him having any kind of good in his heart at all. No signs of any inner struggle or anything, and twists like this only work when there's hints early on that you might not catch the first time around. But when you go back and watch it again, you're not like, hey, they were setting this up really well. It just feels kind of tacked on, like I said earlier. I just wish they would have had some kind of build-up to it. But just because I feel this way about this aspect of Merrick's character doesn't mean he's a bad villain. Far from it. The idea alone makes him a haunting and interesting idea for a villain. Pegasus was a cool idea because he was the villain that could know your every move before even you do, where Merrick is the villain that could not only control your every move, but can also hide in the shadows, controlling all the people around you, meaning he could be watching you at any time. Even his original motivation is a good one. Sure, Pegasus wanted to steal Yugi's puzzle, but he was doing it for what he would call a bit of a noble reason. Merrick is doing it completely for selfish reasons, which is refreshing compared to last season. Although there are a few things that don't make sense to me. They explain the way for Merrick to get the power of the puzzle from Yugi is for him to defeat Yugi in a duel. Fair enough. If that is the case, then, it makes no sense whatsoever for Merrick to send any of his rare hunters after Yugi to duel him. What's Merrick going to do if they win the duel? Duel the rare hunter and take the puzzle from him? Why couldn't the rare hunter take the puzzle for himself if he won, and just rebel against Merrick? Just seems kind of unnecessarily complicated. I mean, the duels against Strings and Joey make sense, because Merrick is in control of their bodies, so it is still technically him dueling. But the other duels with Arcana, the tag duel with Loomis and Umbra, and the duel with Rare Hunter, yeah, she's just called Rare Hunter, feels kind of unnecessary for Merrick's plan. The only other new character I can go into depth talking about in this video is Ishizu. Oh boy, what a character this is. Now, of course, her initial idea of a character is not a bad one. She's used as a sort of character of exposition. A character that is brought in to just bring the other characters and, in extension, the audience up to speed with the plot. And when she first shows up, she's perfectly fine. But then she comes back near the end of the season. Now her purpose has been served, we all know what was at stake and why Kaiba and Yugi were in the tournament. Yet she just sits there and continues to say the same things over and over and over again. You need to save my brother and the entire world is at stake. This wouldn't be that big a deal overall, but when she gets into the season again, they keep cutting to her over again, and after a while it gets irritating and you really start to hate her character. Especially the duel against Kaiba. All she does over and over again is say how the world is in danger and how they need to save her brother. Hearing that same dialogue for so many episodes just gets irritating, annoying, tiring even. Even as a kid I hated it. It would have been improved if she only remained in the beginning of the season to bring the characters up to speed. I'll bring up the beginning of all these character arcs I can in this video, although the one I can really go into depth with at all is Mai. Her character trying to separate from her friends, thinking she doesn't need them. Only to discover she does need them at this point, because having the friends she had helped her succeed the way she did, and not accepting the help she needed ultimately was her downfall. That's really it, because she's taken out pretty quickly after she's introduced. She's really only in the show to help establish the new Merrick as a big threat. Kaiba's back in the season, like I mentioned last time, and although he has regressed a bit since last season, he's become a bit more of an interesting character. They took away the parallel he had with Yugi last season, and gave Kaiba a kind of god complex. Which is an interesting character for a show like this. His real character arc isn't really introduced in this season, although it is hinted at a tiny bit with him saying lines such as, I look to the future, you need to forget the past, it's over. Which plays into next season a lot more, and is actually some nice foreshadowing all things considered, but I'll get more into Kaiba's arc in Season 3, both in the Noah arc and the finale of the Battle City arc. Shockingly, Yugi or the Pharaoh don't really go through any kind of character arc this season, or until Battle City ends. They're pretty much just the main perfect character who's just out to stop Merrick. Which is a bit disappointing as not only did they both have character development last season, it was the best of the entire show, so just reducing them to just this is a bit saddening. Really, in order for your show to be good, your main character has to go through changes as well, but really, Yugi is just here because of a destiny thing. With the exception of Merrick being after him, there really isn't any kind of personal connection. I mean, sure, we now know he's an ancient pharaoh and that's it, even though they kind of spoiled that at the end of last season. Thanks, 4Kids. Maybe they could have just shown how this revelation affects Yugi and the Pharaoh, since there is some big threat that is coming. Show how that affects them, how it affects their friends. But nope, guess we'll have to save the interesting stuff for them for a later season. Really, the character with the most interesting story to him out of our main characters is Joey. He starts off having a pretty boring story, just being, hey, I want to win because I want to be the best. But then Mai gets taken out, and then we get a bit more of a personal story for Joey. Kind of like what Yugi had to do with his grandpa in Season 1. Having Joey try to save a loved one is more interesting with his character than just trying to win. The only really annoying part of this whole thing is that after Mai is sent to the Shadow Realm in this season, and especially during the finals in Season 3, they never shut up about it. Which I get it, it's important to Joey. It's a big thing with his character. He promises to keep Mai safe. But after a while, it's like, we get it. You don't need to hammer it in this much. Kids don't have that short of attention spans. Flashbacks every once in a while is fine, but sometimes those flashbacks just wouldn't stop, and there'd be entire episodes with just them flashing back to Joey and Mai, again and again and again. One last character I would like to talk about is Odion. He's also a really interesting character, and the third newest character that they added in, out of the three main villain characters. You think he's just a standard henchman at first, but he's actually much more than that. He's the character that you think is like just some mindless goon, but it turns out he has a backstory too, serving Merrick because, in a way, he's Merrick's brother, and he'd do anything to protect him, and swore to protect Merrick from his dark side. That's also a really interesting character arc, but the only kind of problem with it is, once again, like Merrick's arc, it's not introduced until too late, and after it's introduced, Odion's taken out of commission, so we can't really connect with this character all that much. Sure, it was cool that we knew that, but really, Odion's turned into a giant plot device, so the whole split personality aspect of Merrick can be taken into account. But really, the part that everyone talks about when it comes to this show is the duels this season. Some people say this season had some of the best duels in the entire show. I can't say I fully agree with that. Some of the duels are very well done, but they do still have the occasional time when Yugi or whatever good guy is dueling will win with a bullshit solution. Which was fine for the first season, as they did it back when they were still trying to get their footing, and then they stopped during the finals. But going back to it, it's really annoying, feeling like a step backwards. Although there are definitely more good duels than bad, and while it's irritating when Yugi breaks the rules to win, rule breaking doesn't happen as much during the duels themselves. The worst part of them, though, is that this seems to be the season with the absolute worst editing. So many mistakes when it comes to what cards go where. Some really bad examples include Arcana and Yugi both having Ra in their hands, even though there's only one copy of him in the show, and he hasn't been introduced yet, or Yugi playing card destruction in defense mode on the field. That doesn't mean there aren't still some positives here and there when it comes to the duels themselves. There was never any point in time where I was screaming, "Why are you playing that card? That's stupid." All of them are really well choreographed and well integrated into the show. Some of the best ones include Yugi vs. Strings, Yugi vs. a mind-possessed Joey. Really, none of the duels are awful, all of them are enjoyable in their own way, and none of them were painful to watch by any means, which is a bit better than Season 1, as there were a couple duels that were kind of painful because they didn't exactly get the rules yet. Some of the duels are cool to see, though, mainly Joey's duels, as it's kind of interesting to see how he would deal with threats that Yugi had to face in Season 1, although it is a bit annoying seeing Weevil cheat again, just like he did with Yugi, except in a bit more of a direct way, so we don't really get to see how Joey would win at full strength. Although I will admit the duel with Mako is also a bit of a highlight, since now he can't pull the same bullshit he did with Yugi back in Season 1. And really, the duels themselves are what's bringing people into the show in the first place. So if I had to pick which I preferred, it would probably be a season with not as good a plot with really good duels, instead of a season with really good character stuff with really bad duels. Although, as I said before, I'll go a bit deeper into these characters when we get to the finals. Also, side note, one of the weirdest duels is when they bring in a character called Jean-Claude Magnum with a ninja deck. You can guess who they're making fun of based on his name alone. I know this video is much shorter than my last one, but that's just because there's really not much to talk about. I know I mentioned mostly negative things this season, but it's still enjoyable. But analysis like this, where I have to score it based on story and character arcs and plot, that's just one of the biggest faults. The story isn't finished, so I can't exactly give it a fair rating, but I gotta do it. And not only is the story itself not finished, the villain's plan itself doesn't make any sense. So, really, I gotta give it a 6 out of 10. While it's still fun to watch, and arguably more fun to watch than Season 1, I feel it could have been improved with the story being finished instead of having to drag it out until the second half of the next season, and had Merrick be the main villain throughout, as opposed to bringing in the twist near the end, or hint at the twist throughout the show, and then bring in him as a big final adversary. I'll see you guys next time for Season 3, the Virtual World arc. And boy, do I promise a longer video with that one.
While you were pondering the ozone, I tried to get to the end zone. You won't be anything without the chips. Your lips are quivering, the time has come to